Okay, just setting up, just getting myself organised. That'll give people time to get into the room, and it'll give me an opportunity to make sure I can just transfer the chat over so that we can see the chat as we go. I think that'll be useful. And I can tell the sound coming through, so the earplugs can come out, which is good. And just setting up for those of you who are in the room and wondering what's going on, starting very, very shortly. And then over here, and I believe I want that screen, properties, and paste, update. Okay, so hopefully it is updating right now. Certainly I will know in a second. And we can check it here. Where is it? Where is it? Okay, let's type into the chat and see if it's working. I will take questions. So start filling up the chat box. Here we go. And let's see if that's going to transfer over to where I need it to be. I believe it has. Cool. Looks like that's working. Make sure it is coming through on the feed. And yes, everything seems to be working well. That's good news. I'm happy about that. And what's the time? It is 1 o'clock. And we are going to start very, very shortly. I'm just going to make sure I've positioned myself. I know my head's off to the side, so I'll put myself sort of in the screen. Make sure that you can see me. And I'm going to start. Okay. Just make sure I am, yep, there we go, in the center. And yeah, that seems to be about right. If I'm not in the scene, you'll let me know. Cool. Okay, I'm going to start. Oh, I almost forgot. Almost forgot the window. The window is always a problem. If I leave the window open, you can pick up every sound coming out from outside, which is a bit of a drag, so we won't do that. Okay, cool. And I'm in the scene. Alright, cool. It's back. We're sorted. Right. Hi, welcome to How to D&D. My name is Fred Wheeler, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 5e for the player and the Dungeon Master, and I'm going to take questions. This is a workshop, it's live stream, so this is an opportunity for the next hour or so to ask me any kind of question you might have, and I will do my best to answer those questions. I do have a few questions already prepared that I've had to answer that people have put into the comments just recently, and so I'm going to run over those while you guys fill up the chat box with any questions that you might want to present to me today. Obviously, if we sort of run out of questions and there's not enough interest, then I will cut the live stream short. But if we get enough questions and enough interest, then we'll just keep going for the full hour. Okay, so let's get started. So the first thing I noticed in one of my comments on my videos just recently was combining magical effects. I believe it was for the spell Bless, and I did a spell video called Bless, and the question was, could you cast, or could one caster cast Bless on 3 individuals in the party, and then another character who could also cast Bless on the same 3 characters, so that they could try and stack that 1d4 worth of Bless bonus to the attack rolls and the saving throws. And the answer is no, you can't combine a magical effect. You can't combine magical effects in that way. You can stack spell effects as long as they are different. So if it's the same spell, you can't layer it on top of each other. So you can't do that. And if you are unsure about that, you can check that out in the player's handbook, and you'll find that on page 205, where it talks about combining magical effects. And it does, in that particular example, it specifies and talks specifically about bless in that example right there. Another topic that's been coming up quite a lot has been surprise. And surprise, which you can find on page 185 of the player's handbook. The thing with surprise is I did a video, and there aren't too many videos on surprise on YouTube, and basically the example I gave was one concept or process for dealing with surprise where you roll stealth checks and you use a passive perception, or you might use an active perception check, or you could just negate the passive check simply because they were distracted. That's only one example of dealing with a surprise attack, and I think I used the example of goblins in the Lost Mine of Phandelver doing a surprise ambush. So that particular video is just one example of surprise. There are other types of surprise. So it doesn't just mean you sneak up, you make a stealth check. If your stealth check is high enough, or the group stealth check is high enough, and you beat the passive check of your enemy, that you are going to get to act first. It doesn't work like that. That's not the only way you can do it. If I've had a few examples where my players have done rather unusual things. Hi Jack, you just keep placing those comments in there. I'll get back to it in a second. I just want to finish this particular line of thought. So I had a group, and in that group was an individual who liked to do very offbeat, random things, and he was a bit of a stirrer. He was like a spanner in the works, and he was playing a caster, I believe it was a wizard, and they were negotiating with some NPCs. They were in a large, dense, packed out market, and suddenly there were some villains, some bandits who were trying to escape through the crowd, and he decided that it was impossible to get to that particular bandit or collection of bandits easily because there was difficult terrain or the crowd was in the way. So he placed a fireball on the crowd and encompassed those bandits and just tried to take them out with fireball. Now, of course, doing such a thing would certainly burn up and turn to ash all of the peasants, so all of the normal commoners in that area. That's exactly what took place. But I actually gave him surprise. Now, the reason being is, one, I was not expecting him to do this. Two, most of the players at the table were shocked and they kind of freaked out a little bit. I still allowed him to take the action first. And this is the reason why. One, if the players are surprised, their characters are probably very, very surprised. Because remember, they're playing that character. Now, if you're not happy with that, determining that, because it's nice and easy when you're making a stealth check and you're comparing it with a passive perception or a perception check or something like that, you've got something to equate who's going to get to go first, who's going to get to act in the first round, who doesn't get to act in the first round. Because if you're surprised in the first round, you don't get to do anything. So if you want a mechanical way of dealing with that, I've used everything from making an additional initiative check or a dexterity check, just determine just how quick they are, or I've got them to make a deception check or a sleight of hand check if they've sort of been trying to disguise what they're doing, and I've got people to make an opposing insight check and compare that value. So you can use a collection of different skills and compare that with something like insight, and this is to determine, okay, well, I'm pretty familiar with this particular individual, I know what his motives are, but I don't usually allow people to make an insight check unless they've been saying something with their character that suggests they don't trust that character, or that they might be expecting them to do something just outlandish. So there's another way of dealing with surprise. Another way of dealing with surprise is, I believe I had somebody who, while they were talking to an NPC, the group's talking to an NPC, and he decides he's going to walk around the back. he just out of the blue just said, look, I walk around the back, pull out my rapier and stab in the back. And I was like you're in the middle of a conversation, you were doing all right, and now you wanted to make an attack? I gave him surprise, and I used the same sort of concept. I used a whole bunch of skills that I thought I selected the one that I thought was most suitable. In this case, I believe he was using sleight of hand, so I got him to make a sleight of hand check. And everybody else was like, look, we've noticed this is the same guy who did the fireball. We want to make an insight check because we think we might better spot that he's up to mischief. And so I had my NPCs make an insight check, only the ones that I thought might be suspicious of the players. And usually you can telegraph that a little bit, like they back off or they'll put their hand on the hilt of the sword and wait as they're talking. So there's another way of dealing with surprise. So it doesn't have to just be stealth check, perception check. Okay, let's have a look in the comments because we got a whole truckload of comments, which I'm really pleased to see. That's excellent. So Jack, you've got here, hey Fred, how do you calculate passive wisdom? Okay, so look, all it is 10 plus the wisdom modifier. So if you wanted a passive wisdom check, then you just take the wisdom modifier and add 10. If you are using a passive check with a sleight of hand, which you might do, there are lots of reasons why you might make a passive check. It's really up to the Dungeon Master. The passive check is a Dungeon Master tool. It's not really a player tool. Okay, so that's 10 plus whatever your modifier is. So a passive perception is 10 plus your perception modifier. Very, very simple. Okay, next. 430. New to D&D. When creating a character, are they used in different games, or is it usually make a different character for each game? Okay, so what you're talking about is there are campaigns that allow you to take the same character, provided you play with the same rules, from one table to the next. And that is Dungeons & Dragons Adventurers League. Now, if you're playing in a homebrew, home game that isn't using the Dungeons & Dragons Adventurers League ground rules or guidelines, then the chances are you will have to make another character unless you're dealing with the same Dungeon Master. If you're dealing with the same Dungeon Master, they might allow you to play a character you've played in a different campaign that they are running. Usually I find that most Dungeon Masters don't like to have characters from one campaign drop over into another campaign, particularly if they have specific items or wealth. If they have a lot of gold or they have magic items on them, you're probably not going to be able to transfer your character from one game to another. Hopefully that answered your question. Next, Jack. Hey, 40, you keep them. Yeah, okay, all right. Jack, again, you keep your character for as long as you can. Okay. All right. Cool keg computer. It's really up to you. Most people like to keep them and grow with them. Yeah. I mean, you can keep the characters. It really depends, as I said, on the Dungeon Master. And that's going to be the ultimate say. And if you're playing Dungeons & Dragons Adventurers League, then you'll be able to carry those characters over. You can go to a different country completely and take that character wherever you want, as long as you follow the guidelines for the Dungeons & Dragons Adventurers League. Okay, 430, so you keep all the same abilities and stats, no need to re-roll for different games. Yeah, like I said, depends on the Dungeon Master. Cool keg computer, if it makes sense, if you have a level 7 character and you are starting a new game with a bunch of level 1s, might be better to start a new one which is similar. Yeah, and that tends to be the case. You know, you might be like, but I really want to play the 7th level character, and you're dealing with a game that's playing at level 1 or level 2. Your power level is way beyond theirs, so it's not really reasonable. And I find that it's best to keep everybody roughly about the same level. Otherwise, if there's too much disparity at the table, it can be a bit unbalancing. Certainly when you get beyond level, I think between levels 1 to 4, there's a big power difference, particularly if you've got a character that's level 5 or higher. And then when you get to level 5 upward, there can be significant power balance changes. It's not quite as bad at the lower levels. Lower levels it's not very good, but at higher levels certainly it's going to make a huge difference. Hopefully that answered your question. And I don't see any more questions coming through the chat, so while you guys are chucking things in here, I'm going to look at my questions and talk about a couple of other things. What's this here? Cool Keg Computer. Hey Fred, is there a good website to check to quickly look up spells and abilities? I've done a whole lot of portable Android phone apps. Some of them are Apple or iOS, and you probably best to utilize them. You can look up spells on a website using a desktop computer or laptop. I think probably the best location is still going to be D&D Beyond. Most of the spells you can access through there and check if you want to go through a website on a desktop computer or laptop. But I find that my cell phone is a much better tool, and there are plenty of pieces of software out there, apps, that allow you to access just about all of the spells. Okay, what else have we got there? I think no, that's it. We're caught up with all the questions so far. Keep posting your questions, and I'm going to move on, and I'm going to start talking about the readied action, because I get a lot of people who get quite confused about the readied action and how that might work. So I want to explain a little bit about the readied action. Now the readied action is on page 193 of the Player's Handbook, and I'm going to turn to that page because I want to make sure I'm getting this right. I know a lot of people get extremely confused by this particular ability because there is no delay your action. You can't delay your action anymore, and this is to stop their building complexity into the game for the Dungeon Master. Otherwise suddenly, you roll initiative and everybody wants to delay until the wizard casts Fireball or some big area effect spell, or you've got somebody who's the rogue who wants to delay until somebody gets close enough to the enemy so they can use their sneak attack. And there are ways of dealing with that without using a delayed action, which you can't do in 5e, but you can use a readied action. So the example I think I was presented with was there was a gargoyle. I did a video on, I believe it was readied actions. I'm not too sure if it was. I think it was. And you have rolled initiative, and unfortunately the rogue wants to get the sneak attack, but they are going to get to act first, which is quite normal. Rogues often get a higher initiative than anybody else. The next person or next one in initiative is not the rogue, it's the gargoyle, but the paladin wants to apply the help action to give advantage to the rogue so they can get their sneak attack. And the reason for doing this, well, maybe they just haven't moved up close enough and not in melee at this present time. So here's a way of dealing with it. As the rogue, you simply stipulate I'm taking the readied action, and my trigger is going to be once the paladin gets into melee combat and applies the help action to the gargoyle so I can get advantage and sneak attack. Great, that's your trigger. So the rogue takes the readied action to make the attack, and the trigger is the paladin gets into melee combat with the gargoyle and takes the help action. Okay, applies the help action. The gargoyle takes its turn. The paladin then takes their turn and applies the help action, and the trigger is activated and the rogue gets to make their attack with advantage and its sneak attack damage as well. Does that make sense? I think that's about as clear as I can be. Also too, when you're taking the readied action, if you have extra attack or more than one attack, you can only make one attack as your readied action. You don't get multiple attacks when you take the readied action. One of the drawbacks of using the readied action is that if you have multiple attacks, you can't get all of them in. You only get to make one attack as your readied action. It's just one of those trade-offs. You can ready an action to disengage from combat. You can ready an action to move away. You can ready an action to take an interaction, like pull a lever, close a door. All those sorts of things can be applied. You can even ready an action to use a bonus action. Maybe that's to cast a spell, so that you can use like Misty Step and get yourself further away. Any of those things might be applied. So that's how the readied action can work. And applying it to an initiative order that doesn't sort of play to your strengths. Does that make sense? Okay, so we've got a whole bunch more questions hopefully in here. And I'm just checking through. Alright, here we go. Okay, so a readied action is a reaction. Yes, you're correct, Cool Kid Computer. When you take the readied action, you're using your action up. Okay, it uses up your action. And it will also use, when it's triggered, your reaction during that round. So on your turn, you use your action that's expended, and the trigger is it's going to use up your reaction during the round when it's triggered. So there's another trade-off with the readied action, simply because you're going to burn up any kind of action that you might have, and you're also going to burn up your reaction. So if there's an opportunity to take an attack of opportunity or an opportunity attack, and you've already got this set up, you've readied an action, then you can decide not to take that readied action and dump it. That's always an option. You don't, if the trigger comes and you decide, no, I'm not going to do it now, you can do that, that's fine. But if you take that readied action as a reaction and the trigger is activated, and then later on something happens and maybe the gargoyle moves out of combat, doesn't disengage, and you want to make an opportunity attack, you can't, because you've already used your reaction. You only get one reaction during your round, that's it. Okay, alright. So another question that had popped up during some of the comments that I'd seen is from a video I did on the Lost Mine of Phandelver. And I did like a workshop for Dungeon Masters. It is full of spoilers. And in this particular question, I think somebody had stated, so what happens if they go, now if you are a player and you're going to be playing in that adventure, I would step away for a little while, because I'm going to talk about the Lost Mine of Phandelver. It basically said Cragmore Hideout. They go to Cragmore Hideout, and what's stopping them from moving straight from Cragmore Hideout to Cragmore Castle, which is actually quite difficult if they are only second level. And there's actually a sidebar that states that the goblins in Cragmore Hideout know where Gundren is. They know where he's been taken. So there's a couple of things that can happen with that scenario. And that is, my group failed a lot of intimidation checks with the goblins, so they weren't able to pull that information out of them, or failed deception rolls or persuasion checks. All of that might have taken place. In some cases, they just decided to skip making those sorts of checks. Either they forgot, or they felt like they'd already failed checks in the past and it was going to be too hard, and so they just went in and attacked rather than trying to talk to the goblins. And the goblins aren't necessarily going to let them have an opportunity to talk anyway. So that's one way of dealing with that situation. You're not necessarily going to go from Cragmore Hideout straight to Cragmore Castle, which means you're going to go to Phandalin and drop off the load. Now here's another issue. From the road where the wagon is that they're transporting, they have to go cross country to get to Cragmore Hideout. To get to Cragmore Castle, there's no road that leads there. That means they have to leave the wagon unattended quite some way off. And so what my group decided to do is they thought, well, we'll drop off the wagon in Phandalin first, and then we'll go to Cragmore Castle. But of course, I'd already set them up. Once they went to Phandalin and dropped off the wagon, I brought the red brands in, and then suddenly they felt like that was a threat, and they had to deal with that first, and then there was a lot of negotiation about whether they deal with the red brands or they go to Cragmore Castle because no Gundren's there. Now I've run Lost Mine of Phandelver more than once. Another scenario is that you simply ignore the sidebar that says what the goblins know in Cragmore Hideout. And you just, what I'd done in that particular situation, I decided, well, actually, none of those goblins in the Cragmore Hideout actually know where Gundren has gone. They don't know he's in Cragmore Castle. Instead, only Clark knows. And Clark won't tell nobody nothing. They're going to have to kill him, and there's nothing they can do about skipping from Cragmore Hideout to Cragmore Castle. That way, that forces the players to go to Phandalin and deal with the Red Brands, which is a much easier threat to deal with, before going to Cragmore Castle. So there's a way of dealing with that. So hopefully that answered that question. And if you're wondering about where that information is about what the goblins know, you'll find it on page 8 of the Lost Mine of Phandalin. Okay. Oh, how's it going, Lego? Alright, so let's have a quick look at the comments. I see it's filling up. Hopefully you guys are liking the format. What I've tried to do is make sure that you can see your own comments in the live stream, and that means as people are coming in, they can see what people have asked. It's not like they can't scroll through and see what's been taking place, but it also means that the focus is on you guys rather than my face. You don't need a great huge blown up image of my face. Okay, Cool Keg Computer. If the players want to use random things they find as weapons, like a stick, an umbrella, how do you assign damage? Okay, so there's actually a section in the player's handbook called Improvising a Weapon, and when you're dealing with an improvised weapon, unless you have a special ability, I believe there's a feat called the Tavern Brawler feat. It's one of the worst feats in the game, but what it does allow you is proficiency with improvised weapons, which would be an umbrella or a stick, like a walking stick. And that's the only time you get to add proficiency to your attack. So as the Dungeon Master, you decide whether you're going to use dexterity or strength based on what they're utilising. Usually you're just going to use their strength modifier and there'll be no proficiency added. In terms of working out damage for an umbrella or something like a stick, an improvised weapon, it actually states in the book that it's a 1d4 plus their strength modifier. And I'm just going to find you the page now. I believe it's not too far from where I am right now. And just give me a second. Improvising attacks. I believe it is under attacks here. Why can't I find it? Oh, it should be very close spaces. No, I can't find it. I don't know why. I know it's close by making attacks. It should be under making attacks section, but I can't see it. Sorry, I can't give you a page number. As I said, this is like really impromptu stuff, so I'm on the fly as it is. Okay, right. So what else we got here? Lego. If one of the players die, can I unkill any player? Well, okay. So first of all, none of your players should be dying at your table, okay? If somebody looks like they're going to die at your table, one of your players, then you should be calling the emergency services straight away. If you're in America, I think that's 911. In New Zealand, that's 111. If you're in a different country, ring somebody else, whoever the emergency services are. But if you're talking about their characters die, of course, as the Dungeon Master, you can reconnoitre something. You can just say, oh look, it was just a flesh wound. You didn't perish. You're the Dungeon Master, you can do anything. What I find with dealing with death in your game is you have to check with your players what they're comfortable with. Some players would be perfectly happy with that Lego. They would be like, yeah, awesome. That's fantastic. Great, my character's not dead. Other players will say, look, if my character's died, I just want it to die, and I don't want you to just sort of make up some reason why he's still alive, and I'm quite happy to make a new character. So as the Dungeon Master, you can certainly do it. I've done more than a few videos on the total party kill, how they work, why they happen, how to manage them, and what sort of options you can use with character death. And if you are unsure, I suggest watching those videos. But yeah, I find the best way to deal with character death is somebody's character dies, not their player. Okay, if somebody dies, is ask them how they want to manage that. If you're the sort of person who's happy to deal with it in that way, then just ask them what they would prefer, and we go from there. Okay, Lego, okay, retracted comment, alright, that's fine. What's this? Rob Hell 82. Hi Fred, how's it going? Hi Rob. I was really nervous before I started to DM Lost Mine of Phandelver, especially when the PCs got to the town. Now I have established a living town. Yeah, Phandalin is a great place to have NPCs. Full of different NPCs. Lesson learn equals relax. Yeah, no, look, honestly, if you're starting out as a Dungeon Master, try to relax, try to give yourself a break. You're not expected to do everything correctly the first time round. That would be, like, nobody does it perfect the first time round. Even the people who think they didn't do it perfectly the first time round. And I've come across a few Dungeon Masters who thought the first time they ever Dungeon Mastered, they were like spot on, and they were, I was just like a natural, I stepped into it. But, I think that's ego talking rather than reality. So don't worry about it. It's cool. I have a video on the Lost Mine of Phandelver. It's like a workshop I did. It's probably one of the more watched videos that I have out there right now. So if you might find that useful, Rob, if you're still running the Lost Mine of Phandelver. The other thing too with the Lost Mine of Phandelver and the location is you don't need to bring all of those NPCs into the game straight away. You'd only have to introduce maybe one or two, or where the players actually go. So you don't have to pick up all of those strands all at the same time. Okay, Brian. How's it going, Brian? What do you think of a house rule allowing cantrips and only cantrips to be used with a thief's sneak attack dice? Would this be game unbalancing in your opinion? Well, first of all, can the rogue actually cast a cantrip? Have the ability to cast spells? If they do, then fine. Okay, let's move on from there. So provided you've got a rogue who can cast a cantrip, because cantrips are actually pretty powerful, particularly as you level up. As you get more powerful, those cantrips are going to do a lot more damage. And then suddenly you combine them with something like sneak attack. Remember, your dagger and your weapons that you use as a rogue, they don't increase in power. So you are applying something that will increase in power if you start utilizing a cantrip and sneak attack. Okay, that's just one aspect to it. Will it be game breaking and unbalancing? Look, the game is not balanced already. Even Dungeons and Dragons 5e is not balanced. They certainly tried to make sure that there's less balance issues, but we're not talking about Dungeons and Dragons 4e, which was almost perfectly balanced until you got to about level 8, and then it just turned into an unholy mess, and there was no balance whatsoever. And that was their greatest attempt at trying to create game balance. So it's up to you. You decide whether it's going to be game breaking or whether you want that in your game. And you can try something out and then take it away if you like later on. I would suggest that you're trying to give more stuff to the players that is mechanical in combat, and you're probably better off to give more to the players that will give them utility, and because the great thing about utility, giving them options in terms of utility rather than in combat, is that it will allow those people who like to look for solutions and problem solving to come up with interesting actions or solutions, and will create a lot more fun at your table. I think that's probably the better way. Even when you're introducing something like a magic item, utility magic items always probably a better option than something that's combat focused, which is obviously the thing that most players want straight away. Okay, Rob Hell 82. Hopefully that answered your question, Brian. Rob Hell 82. Thing is, Glassstaff managed to escape. Now I want to bring him back for some revenge. Well, yeah, you absolutely should, Rob. If he escaped and he wants to have revenge, now remember, you need to give him enough time to build up enough of a following, or enough minions, or henchmen, or mercenaries, or whatever, to actually make him a viable threat. Because remember, Glassstaff doesn't want to be squashed like a bug. He wants to come back. He's obviously managed to escape. He's been schooled by the players, characters. So now it's time to come back with a much stronger force and a better plan. And maybe he doesn't make himself a viable threat. Maybe he puts a few layers of insulation between himself and his henchmen, or hench people, or hench monsters, or whatever. Okay, I can see the questions are filling up. I'm just going to take a glass of water, and I'm just going to scroll back here just a fraction, because I'm slightly behind. Lewis, looks like I got back just in time. Yes, Lewis, you did. We are still here for at least about half an hour-ish. Melissa, let's see what you've got here. Is there any way I can encourage my party to speed up their play? Is putting a timer on them evil? Laugh out loud. No. Using an egg timer, you know, one of those little egg timers that has running sand? I've actually got one in my suitcase, and I will pull it out sometimes if people are having trouble taking their turn. Another good way, though, to get people in the habit of making sure they are preparing before somebody else is, if you have a Dungeon Master screen, is to put a little tag with their name and put it in the order of combat. So maybe from left to right, you put them in from lowest to highest, okay? And so they can see who's next in the order, which means they know they need to prepare. And then by actually saying, look, I need you to prepare your turn before it's your turn, you can see where you are in the order, and so it shouldn't be hard for you to figure out. Another way of speeding up play is when they're making their attack rolls, is to also have them rolling their damage at the same time. I know a few players who are like adamant that it affects the way their results on their dice are, and they're very superstitious. And they rub their dice and they hold them up the right way, because, you know, all of the particles have to be in the right place for when they roll it to get a high roll. But really, it's much more useful and helpful for a table if they roll their attack roll and their damage roll at the same time. Even if the attack roll isn't successful and they've got a damage roll, it doesn't matter. Fine. But if their attack roll is successful, the damage roll's already been done, you don't have to wait for them to do that. What I do is when I'm playing, is I'll have my attack dice and my damage dice set aside, ready to go, and when the Dungeon Master says it's my turn, I'll say, okay, I'm going to cast Fireball, or I'm going to cast Ray of Frost. Pick up my dice, I roll them all at once, and I tell them what the results are. Nice and fast. It's a good way of doing it. Also too, if you get somebody at your table, Melissa, to be the person who prompts people rather than you doing that sort of thing, that will speed things up for you as well. Okay, I think we answered that satisfactorily, Melissa. I think that's covered that reasonably well. Rob Hell 82. One of my PCs is a religious character, so now I want to get into pantheons or deities or gods. Yep. Do you have any tip on creating religious NPCs on the fly? Yeah, I do. I have a video on creating NPCs quickly. I believe it's improvising with story cubes, and these are like little cubes with a whole lot of images on them. And this idea is not my own personal idea. I know that Matt Click at A Fistful of Dice did a video on it, But the original idea came from a guy called Mike Shaw, and that's the Sly Flourish or the Lazy Dungeon Master. So if you look at the original video, you can look that up later on if you want, you can see he actually shows you how he does that. He uses like face cards from Pathfinder or Paizo, and he rolls 3 of these dice, and each dice represents something about that particular NPC. Maybe the first dice is their personality trait, and it's covered in images like light bulbs or fish, things like that, and you just use that as a bait for your brain to figure out where to go with it. I think the video itself will tell you more. The other way you can do quick NPC creation is the original generic Dungeon Master screen had an NPC creation chart on it, and you could port that over to whatever Dungeon Master screen you're using, or you could go and purchase that if you wanted to. Maybe you can borrow it. I've done a review on that screen and the new screen. You can find those videos as well, and it basically breaks it down into roll on a chart to determine personality traits for the NPC, their ideal, their bond, and their flaws. And so you can build an NPC fairly quickly for your religious character just by using the same mechanical breakdown that a player's character has for the roleplay aspect. Hopefully that makes sense. Yeah. Let's have a look. I'm just scrolling down here. I'm good to see that I am not caught up now. I can see there's lots and lots of comments, so I will have to keep moving along fairly quickly. Rob Hell 82. Melissa, my players are somewhat the same. You have to lower your expectations. Yeah. Look, when you're starting out, particularly if they're new, they are going to take a bit longer. That's one of the side effects of being new. Alright, Melissa, what do you got here? I think maybe making the NPCs react while they are debating might be helpful. Yes, it can. But I don't want to mess them off. You don't want to pee them off too badly. Okay, it's alright. Look, I find that making events and NPCs do things, or monsters take actions when the players are sort of indecisive, and you've got to allow them some time to sort of discuss. But if you find that it's stalling things a bit too much and you feel it's time to move things on, then you can just do that. One of my most common techniques for moving things on is, particularly if I can't get a word in because everybody's talking at the same time, is I will pick up a couple of miniatures and I will just draw out a map, and they probably won't even notice me drawing the map out, and then I'll place them out, and then I'll put their characters in basically the location they would be roughly standing, and they're like, oh, what's going on? Well, actually, while you were doing this, these goblins snuck into the room, and yeah, you're going to have to roll initiative because there's going to be a combat. And I can do that as a surprise attack. I might have them make stealth checks. All of that is certainly one way of moving things on. You don't have to do it as abruptly as that. You can certainly just have the NPCs say something that will move the story on if you want to, so you don't get locked in the same location. Okay, yes, Melissa, it's a good strategy. Drell Bard. Okay, for everybody who doesn't know, Drell Bard has a channel, and he does some really good character builds. He has some Dungeon Master advice there, a lot of tactics, and I suggest going and checking out his channel and subscribing. Drell Bard, while you're here, man, you have got to turn off hiding how many subscribers you have, because that's one of the things that's going to make it really, really difficult to build up at least 1,000 subscribers. I wanted to say that, I'm going to say it right now. If you do that, that will help people jump onto your channel. Okay, so I would definitely turn off hiding the fact that you don't want anybody to see how many subscribers you have. Hey Fred, what's the good work? What have I missed? Well, you haven't missed very much. I mean, you can replay this at a later date. We've talked about quite a few different things so far. I'm going to scroll down. I'm a little bit behind. Keep posting those comments because I'll keep answering them. Alright, what do we got here? Cool kid computer. I like that if they go past a certain time, I automatically become the monster. It becomes the monster's turn. Yes, you can do that. Yep, it can work. Good word. Yep, that's fine. We're moving on. Full gamer. Alright, let's give some time to full gamer. How's it going? Any helpful tips when you have to do a massive battle? Okay, alright. For example, 100 monsters or NPCs, thanks. Okay, so that can come up quite often. I've done it with 400 zombies. I've done it with 200 orcs. It can be done. My suggestion is if you have stand-ins or miniatures, or if you're not using miniatures, you just draw in a line and tell them, look, the only thing you can really affect is the front line. If they're throwing an area effect spells, then I sort of roughly calculate, and in the Dungeon Master guide there is information on how to calculate roughly how many monsters or NPCs or creatures are affected by a certain radius or area effect spell. And so I'd advise checking that out because there's some information there, or you can just guesstimate. So just worry about the front line. What I often do is I'll take out, okay, so I've got a huge number of creatures. I'll write down how many there are, and then I'll multiply that by how many hit points, and I'll just take like a hit point pull. Does that make sense? So the front line will always be there. It might diminish as they knock off a few, and all I need to worry about is as they do damage, I just reduce the total pull of hit points that the monsters have. So they're not actually fighting so much one monster or creature or NPC, they are fighting a horde. So you just use that great huge pull to work it all out on. Another way is that you can still use miniatures, or not use miniatures, but you can use one miniature to represent a whole bunch of creatures or monsters, and you just assign them a certain number of hit points. So maybe you just bump it up. So this miniature actually represents 10 monsters, or this stand-in or pawn, or even an ice cream container or a lid container. This represents 10 monsters of this type, 10 orcs or 10 goblins or whatever. And so you multiply that 10 by how many hit points they have, and you use it like a pull, just like I talked about before. Okay, what else do we have here? Oh, by the way, when it comes to massive battle, you will find they run very long, and you need to have a group who are wanting that sort of thing, because it can be very grindy. Sometimes it's better to just run it as a narrative rather than do the mechanical side. Okay, cool kid computer. Have you ever tried playing a game over the internet, like over Skype? Does that actually work okay? Look, I've never done it myself. I know I have a lot of friends who do quite often, particularly for Dungeons and Dragons Adventurers League. I'm not really a fan of playing over the internet because I can play in person. I have the choice. I get very addicted to video games. Now, this channel will be so much more popular and probably do a lot better if I played Dungeons and Dragons video games on the channel. And the reason I don't do it is I get addicted. I would be hooked, and there would be a whole lot of problems, and I'd just be sitting here for 8 hours, and I'd probably be streaming the whole thing the whole time. But that's not good for me. It's not good for anybody else. Not good for my relationships. So as a result, I try to avoid playing games over the internet. But that doesn't mean you can't do it yourself. I would suggest doing it as a last resort, or if you just want to get in more games and you can't get that face-to-face. And there's nothing wrong with doing it. It's all right. It's just for me, I can't. Melissa, laugh out loud, computer kid. Hulk, no like waiting. Hulk, no like waiting? Nah, Hulk don't like waiting, you're right. Okay. Alright, here we go. Drellbard. Flattery will get you everywhere. I'll take that advice. I'm glad to hear it. Rob Howell 82. How many short rests is a good maximum per day? How often can a creature rest per day? Don't they get bored to death? Okay, it's a lot of questions. Okay, so how many short rests can you have? It's dependent on how many hit dice the player's characters have. They can take short rests as long as they have hit dice to spend. If they don't have hit dice to spend, then they can't. If they're not trying to regain something like a hit points to their hit pool maximum because they've lost hit points, and they're trying to get back a class feature or ability because they need to take a short rest to get it back, really, that's up to you. You can throw in wandering monsters and patrols. That's what they're there for, to stop them doing that. And there is no number. There's no magic number about how many short rests they should have during an adventuring day. There's no such thing. So you just decide what you think is suitable. Do you want them to be able to adventure for 1 minute, 5 minutes, 15 minutes, or do you want them to be able to do running battles? Often I would use running battles, and so therefore allowing them to regain hit points or escape was important. Sometimes with a running battle you can't escape, and so you need to be able to have those resources. Otherwise you just wind up becoming one of those dungeon masters who's not very nice, one of those ones. Okay, how often can a creature rest per day? Okay, so in the monster manual, your monsters have hit dice assigned to them, and you spend them just like you normally would. And all you do is you just roll whatever the dice is, and you don't. I mean, you could add a modifier to it if you wanted to, but I usually just roll the dice. Don't add the big number at the end, otherwise it's going to be too much. Monsters can take short rests too, and they should. Otherwise, the players, if they didn't finish the job off the first time, they should be coming back. Yes. I look. If your monsters are getting bored, they can go and leave and have a short rest, come back later, or they can. I will have my monsters die if I get bored, just to move things on. Okay. Drow Bard depends on how many hours are in the day in your game world. Well, your long rest is 8 hours, so that leaves quite a few hours that you can take short rests. So if there's 24 hours in the day and they take a long rest, and it's potentially possible to almost have somewhere in the vicinity of maybe 15 short rests. It would be crazy, but you could do it if you wanted. Rob Hal 82, I mean, that's a lot. 2 short rests per day maximum, in my opinion. Well, look, it's up to you. You don't have to do it that way. Okay, Rob Hal 82, is it 32 hours? 24 hours? 24 hours. Yeah. They've got to sleep at some point. And they've got to get enough sleep that they're able to keep functioning. There's a very small amount of information in the player's handbook about not sleeping, and you make a constitution check. The dungeon master can ask for it. It's not very high, I believe. The check, I think you make it a 10 or something like that. You can make it higher. I've talked about sleep. I've got a video on the topic actually, but Xanathar's Guide talks about how to deal with sleep as well, and taking rests. Okay, Steam Naught. How much actual time should short rest be? Well, a short rest, as laid out in the player's handbook, is 1 hour. You can't do anything strenuous for 1 hour. It's pretty simple. Okay, next. Deve1HVMK. How do you stop the Beast of Carmel from killing your dragon? I don't know. I have no idea. You've lost me there. Nice one. Oh dear. Well, I caught up with all the questions. If I've missed anybody, look, you just need to throw out a comment so I can get back to it. Oh, it is so warm today. Very, very hot. I was talking with my group, and this is not so much about answering questions, and they were saying that I should do a video on winging it, doing a game on the fly. And this conversation came up as a result of my Friday game. My friend Simon Abbott wasn't very well, and he said, look, I don't think I can Dungeon Master Storm King's Thunder anymore. Will you take over? And we're sitting there and everybody's like looking at me and it's like, well, I guess we're finished for the night. We'll just have a chat. And I said, no, give me a bit of time. I have a talk to Simon and I'll draw something up and we'll get started. And I ran the game that night. I haven't read Storm King's Thunder, and they were kind of shocked that I could pull it off. And I said, well, first of all, it doesn't matter what's in the book. I can make stuff up. 2, I have strategies for dealing with winging it. And I think they wanted me to talk to you guys about them and thought that they might be useful. So if that's the sort of thing that you might find useful as a video, I can do that as a live stream, or I can do that as a fixed video. The problem is I won't do too many pre-recorded videos simply because they take more time and I do not like editing. That's not to say that they won't exist. I will have pre-recorded videos. They will still happen, they're just at a slower rate, probably more back to like 1 a week, and the live streams will be a bit more constant than like every day, or close to. So I can do that. I'm quite happy to do a video on winging it if that's the sort of stuff you would find useful, and maybe we can even talk about it now if people want to hear about that. I know there's still a few people sitting in the room, so yeah, an opportunity if you want. Okay, Drill Bard. Winging it is really bad for beginners. Even pro DMs should have a number of props pre-prepared for that situation. Yeah, it is. You are quite right, Drill Bard. That beginning, as a beginning dungeon master, winging it is a bad idea. But if you are more experienced and you are trying to get into the habit of winging it, it's one of those things that you sort of develop over time. I know some dungeon masters always struggle with it, and it might be simply down to the strategies and techniques that they use to get through that, which is why I said, look, I can do a video on that topic, but I think it's probably more suitable, as Drill Bard points out, probably for more experienced dungeon masters rather than a beginner. Okay, what else we've got here? Steamnaut. I find it difficult to describe. I find it difficult to describe things, places or emotions sometimes. Are there any resources to improve that? Yes, there is. And I did a video on improvising, and I believe it was like describe a scene. And I believe that Dawnforge Cast also did a video on the topic quite a long time ago. That's Andrew Armstrong. And the technique for trying to describe something is, if you're a person who thinks visually, then picture something in your head. If you don't have a picture in your head, then have a whole lot of images that you're either on your laptop, on a tablet, on a computer, maybe just a book that you take with you. I often pull images from what I remember seeing in a movie, and I will describe that scene from that movie for my adventure. Now, describing emotions. Here's the problem with describing an emotion. Are you describing a player's emotion, or are you describing the emotion of a monster or NPC? Because that's not really something that somebody can see. You know, that's internal stuff. So describing an emotion, not such a good idea. If you're talking about atmosphere, trying to describe an atmosphere, just work with what you've got. Right now I can tell you it's a steaming hot day. There is sweat dripping off me. I can barely breathe in this small room, and I feel claustrophobic. Okay? It's as simple as that. Use what you know. You can probably remember a time when there's a particular atmosphere when you felt scared, or if you're not into movies, maybe music. I know a lot of people like to use music to describe stuff, but you can use images, something you remember from a movie, maybe a piece of artwork to help describe your scene, and you just lock it in your brain. I find that works well for men. for women, they tend to think in terms of words. Not to say that they don't think in terms of images, but I find they will remember whole. I've come across people who can women who can remember sections of books, and they will take pieces of that book and retell it in their game, which is a very clever technique, or retell a few words from a song, and they'll break it down a little bit and change it just a little bit so that players don't pick up. So one strategy of dealing with that. Okay, Comic Book Jedi 1. Oh man, you've been around for a long time. I wasn't expecting to see you in here. Okay, what things from older editions, magic items that you have added to your game? Okay, I added a glass sword. I think I added a belt of, I can't remember the name of it, but it basically changes the sex of the character. So if they're male, they become female. If they're female, they become male. And it's cursed, so they can't take it off. I had a spade, a magical spade, that basically allowed you to create a wonderful harvest. As long as you dug the ground up with the spade, you'd get a fantastic harvest in the next season. I know that's an utterly useless magic item, but these are often magic items that I have pulled from the past. I've used a Vorpal sword. It's quite common. It shows up in just about every edition of the game, and the Vorpal sword obviously is from Alice in Wonderland. Then I've probably used, for those of you who know the story of is it Darian Gray, who had the portrait and he had a picture of himself which he stored away, and the picture showed him aging but he never aged. So I used a magic item like this, and this particular magic item, somebody shrunk it down, put it in a locket, and they had a locket, and the image of them kept degrading and getting older, but they always stayed healthy. Really overpowered. Didn't think clearly about when I was making that. I've used most of the magic items from the original Ravenloft. I pulled. There's not a lot of magic items in the Isle of Dread or Island of Dread, but I've used magic items from there as well. I've pulled out magic items from Keep on the Borderlands, and I made some of my own. So yeah, I've run quite a few different old adventures right back at the very beginning, and used 5e to run them. So yeah, I even used Beyond the Magic Mirror, which is based loosely on Through the Looking Glass, which is an Alice in Wonderland story. So yeah, those are the sorts of things I have used Comic Book Jedi 1. Drow Bard. I might suggest that winging is a tool you need to learn for the unexpected situations that arise in a game. Well, yes, they certainly are. I think a lot of people, when they think about winging it and improvising, they don't necessarily give you, they give you like a broad stroke, but they don't give you very specific tools for how to do it. So, but I'm not going to necessarily talk about that unless people want to. That's right, thank you, Joel Bard. I knew you would remember it. I remember that cursed item, the girdle of masculinity and femininity. There is one in the old Baldur's Gate game. Got a shock when I equipped it without identifying it. Live and learn. Yeah, but I mean, it doesn't matter if it's a cursed item. You can't identify a cursed item in Dungeons and Dragons 5e. You might be able to in the video game Baldur's Gate, but yeah, you got no hope of figuring out if something is cursed with identify, or even taking a short rest and then sort of fondling or hanging onto the playing around with that item to figure out what it does. If it's a cursed item, you're going to find out later on when the curse is activated and you start using, or you've had that item for a period of time. Some magic items that are cursed don't always act exactly the same way. And I know a lot of people get confused and they think, oh, well, hang on, if it says it's magical, I should be able to identify the different attributes. But if the attribute that's assigned to it is the curse, then you won't know what that does. And some cursed magic items might have a positive effect that can be picked up. So it's enticing, and this is often how a magic item that's cursed should be structured. It's got an enticement. Okay, so I know that it's going to give me a +1 bonus, and it does some other thing like it does fire damage or whatever. But I don't know that if I pick up the sword and I use it, that I can't put it down, that I can't let go of it. It's going to be stuck in my right hand forever. And not only that, that slowly but surely I'm going to develop some sort of disease. Or I think I had a magic item which was the Gauntlet of Ogre Strength. And when they put it on, they were really strong and they were like so happy. It took them so long to get that item, but I had made it a cursed item. And they slowly but surely, and I took a bit of time with it, they started turning into an ogre. So yeah, you only find out once you start utilising a cursed item what it will do to you. Okay, what else we got here? Drow Bard. That's it. The video game. Yes. It's a good video game. I do remember the game. I remember playing it. I've played quite a few video games, but as I said, nowadays I've got to avoid playing them. It gets me into too much trouble. Steam Naught. Have you ever homebrewed any player options that have been used recently? I've used a little bit of information from the Unearthed Arcana. So I utilised the new Ranger build for the Beastmaster because nobody wants to play a Beastmaster at my table, because as it stands, the Beastmaster is just, it's not very good, or people don't fully understand how to utilise it. In terms of combat, it just seems too weak, so people avoid it. And also too, your animal companion with Beastmaster gets crushed pretty quickly. I've used the Blood Hunter, but that's not my own creation. As that happens, I don't really create player options for classes and races myself. I tend to homebrew monsters and magic items and locations and maps. I might homebrew an NPC, a villain, something like that, all of those things, but I try not to add more tools to my player's handbook, because what happens is, with all of those different things playing around, players love having a big toy box to play with, but it's just a headache to manage, and I find that it starts forcing the game into what can I do mechanically based on my character build, rather than how can I think about what I have in terms of my skills and just using my brain, how can I solve a problem or do something cool that doesn't fall within the realm of the rules as written in the book or some of the source books. I would prefer my players to start thinking outside of that, so I am forced to create maybe a new mechanic or a contest or something like that to resolve what they're trying to do. I think that's a much more fun way to deal with it. So I don't build or create a lot of homebrew player options. It's mostly homebrew monsters, magic items, locations, maps, and NPCs. And maybe even a story, but I pinch from a lot of locations. What else have we got here? I think that's caught up. That's good. I think we're just starting to run over time. So unless there are any more questions that really stand out for you, please put them in now before I shut down the live stream. What I need to know from people is, was this helpful? I noticed quite a lot of people jumped in. I tried to advertise it a bit better this time. So I have actually tried to make sure that you get a bit more warning about when it's going to happen. So if that was good, that's great. I can't do that all the time because of just my life and what's going on around me. On a Saturday it's possible. I can certainly promote and tell you what I'm doing. If people want more questions and answers videos, I'm happy to do them. That's fine. But if it's less important to you and you want something else, then just let me know right now, or later on at the end of the live stream in the comments section. Are there things that you would prefer? Okay, there's a couple of comments just coming through, so we'll just deal with them. Rob Hell 82, do you have puzzles in your games? Very rarely. A really good channel though, if you want to deal with puzzles, is Wally DM. I think Wally DM does fantastic puzzle videos, and they're quite complicated. He gives you multiple options. The reason I don't do puzzle videos is you need to have players at your table who like doing puzzles, and I find that often they'll get stuck so badly that we wind up sitting there for half an hour, and there's no progress, and they're completely lost, because what I thought was easy to figure out, or somebody else thought was easy to figure out, doesn't actually translate into them understanding what the solution is. So this is why I would highly recommend, if you want to use puzzles, you can. I would check out Wally DM. He does really good videos. He usually provides multiple solutions and options to solving the puzzles, and yeah, they're quite fun. I enjoy watching them. And what else you got here? Rob Hell 82. And if so, do you hand out physical puzzles to the PCs? I have. Sometimes if I have used a puzzle, I'll hand out a physical puzzle. I think at one time I gave them a Rubik's Cube. Another time I handed them a whole lot of boggle dice with letters on them, and they had to arrange it in the correct order, these dice. They'd flip them around, turn them around, till they got the right combination. I don't usually create my own puzzles, but I will certainly use puzzles if it's in a pre-made adventure. Most of the pre-made adventures puzzles aren't too complicated or difficult. I think the only one that I've ever come across that was in a pre-made adventure in terms of a puzzle that was really difficult and hard for people to figure out was, spoilers for The Rise of Tiamat right now. So if you're playing through that, put your fingers in your ears. Put your fingers in your ears. Don't listen. Was when they were dealing with the maze. The maze is a magical maze, and it's horribly complicated, and the rules for dealing with it change. For each step, it's a slightly different approach. So it can take a long time. It's very, very difficult. I think the only reason they got through is there were a couple of players who had already played The Rise of Tiamat, and they just didn't tell me that they knew what the solution was, or they had already read the book, and everybody else got horribly confused, which is why I try not to use puzzles in my adventures unless it's written into the pre-made adventure. What else we got here? Steamnaut. It was helpful. Your channel keeps being a big reference to go back to, and has helped me start my game on D&D. Thank you so much. You are welcome, and I'm glad it has been a reference. I do understand that a lot of people pop onto my channel, they subscribe, and then suddenly you're winding up getting like a live stream, and it's quite a long video, and you don't really know where the content is going to start. I try to make sure that's seen. I try to put that in the description so you know where to start. I know people preferred the 3 to 6 minute short videos that were pre-recorded, and they'll still happen, just not as many as I used to. It was gonna affect my health and my life too much doing that. It's very, very hard for a small channel, unless you're doing this full time, to pre-record. Even the big channels often don't do that. I think the only one I know of who has got a consistent every day, does a live stream, and also does pre-recorded videos would be Nerd Anarchy. The only channel I can think of. Even Dawnforge Cast doesn't. He's trimmed things down. Okay, what else we've got here? Cool Keg Computer. Hey Fred, just wanted to say thank you for having this great channel, and thank you for never being vulgar or inappropriate. Okay. Alright, well, you're welcome. I'm going to be honest right now here, Cool Keg Computer. I have, I just deleted those videos, and a lot of people wanted me to live stream my home game, and that caused me so many problems. A lot of people enjoyed it, and it was really long, and there was a lot of swearing in it and inappropriate and vulgar language, because we just go completely bananas at the end of the week with work and so forth. Normally everybody just goes bleh, and everything comes out, and we are just shocking sometimes. So I have been, but I have tried to delete that stuff. I actually find it interesting how a lot of people live stream. They must have to give their players quite a lot of instructions about how they need to censor what they say at the table. Otherwise you get demonetized, or you can get banned. So you've got to be careful. Alright, I'm glad I can share your videos with family and friends. Well, that's really what I want you to be able to do. I don't really, what I really would love is there's a lot of people who are adults or teenagers who are playing Dungeons and Dragons, but I want kids to be playing this game. I don't just mean teenagers who are 14 or 12, but it would be great if parents are getting their kids to play, and that the audience is a lot younger, say in the range of anywhere from 8 upward, even 5 or 6. Now, it'd be very difficult to use the full-blown rules for somebody as young as that, but it would be great if you can. One of the things I will say, though, if you're going to play games and have content for really young players, is the concept of death is probably best left out. And unfortunately, some of my videos do include topics like that. Okay, I've got a couple of questions here. Panarev, if I got your name wrong, I apologise. Panarev, you've got here, hi sir, how are you doing? I'm doing well. I'd like to ask, how do you approach rule on aging process in Dungeons and Dragons from the magical attacks like horrifying visage? I don't usually worry about it. Usually your adventure won't be taking place over such a long time frame that you'll find a player gets too old, they get decrepit. And I think it really, if you're going to start putting in mechanics because they are aging, now there are situations. I've had a monk who was aged badly, wound up going from like 25 to 60. I still played that character. My dungeon master didn't impose any major penalties mechanically, but it did mean that I looked very different. My character did anyway. But also the option is, if they get to a point where they're starting to sort of get penalties, maybe it's time to retire the character. That's really, these are things that you ask the player and see how they feel about, and as the dungeon master you decide whether you think that's really important to impart into the game. I've met a lot of people over the years who, when they're 50 or 60, aren't very capable physically, and I've met some who are incredibly physical and capable and seem to be stronger, fitter, and more capable than they were when they were 20. So yeah, you guys are playing with like fantasy heroes. These characters can do a lot. Panarev, last session one of my players ended up with 110 years. Oh dear. More than necessary to pass the maximum human age, but there is no law related talking about penalising or penalties when dealing with aging. Sorry about the spelling. Yeah, it's all right. Look, I think I've answered that question. I think it's really, you decide as the dungeon master how this is going to work. I mean, if going from 20 to 110, maybe they simply age before everybody and they perish and die. You can do it that way. It's that relationship between the dungeon master and the player. Do they trust you enough? Are they going to be, particularly if you're dealing with friends, it's really your call. And yes, there is no information on that. And most of that's quite deliberate on the part of Wizards of the Coast. They often don't put information in any of the books about how to deal with character death. They leave it to you. You decide how that's going to work with your players. Okay, what do we got here? Panarev, horrifying visage. Each non-undead creature within 60 feet of the ghost that can see must succeed. Yeah, I believe it was a ghost for my character too. Must succeed at a DC 13 wisdom saving throw or be frightened for 1 minute. Yeah, that's fine. I remember that. Yep. Panarev. If you save the fail by 5 or more, the target also ages by 1d4 times 10 years. Yes, I do remember that too. True. Hehe. Thanks for asking. Okay. All right. I think we covered everything. I think this is a good time to stop. As I said, put it in the comments and make sure you put in the comments if you want more videos like this, and I will do them if you want them. What's this? Steamnord. How often do you do these? I always find myself missing them because of time zones. Yeah, I know. Look, I do a live stream pretty much every day. I am right now. Trying to line up my time zone with Spain is going to be difficult, and I know you'll often miss them. As time goes by, I'll get better at sorting this sort of stuff out, but because I don't do it as a full-time job, I can't lock in a scheduling time. As a general rule, on a weekend, like on the Saturday, New Zealand Standard Time, I will stream around 12 or 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock. In this case, I actually publicised it a bit more so that people would know. But I can't lock in a time with you, unfortunately. Sometimes I'll even do the live stream before everybody gets up, or I'll wait until everybody leaves the house so it's a bit quieter. Or if they don't leave the house, I'll just do it when I find time. Steamnord. Yeah, okay, alright. Okay, we're going to call quits there. I'm going to go and shut this stream down, and we will catch up with you next time. And like I said, if there's anything else you want to start and talk about, or any feedback you want to give, put that in the comments when the video gets published. It usually takes between half an hour and an hour for YouTube to finish processing the video before it will be available. And yeah, we will say goodbye. Oh, before you leave, if you found this video helpful or informative, please share or like the video. If you're not subscribed, this is a good time to press the subscribe button if you like this sort of content. I do this sort of thing, lots of different stuff, often live stream. And if you want to get occasional notifications, you can click the bell button underneath or right beside the subscribe button on my channel. Often it's on the video underneath there's like a notifications button you can press as well. If you have any questions, like I said, put them in the comments. If you have any feedback, give that to me as well. I want to make the live streams as clean and as nice as I possibly can, which is why I tried to sort of have an intro screen this time around. If you want to support my channel, watch more of my videos. Is always helpful. I get a little bit of ad revenue. It's not a lot, but I get a little bit. And if sharing the videos means that other people watch my videos, and that'll help support me as well. Gets me materials and equipment, and I can keep increasing what I'm doing. And hopefully I can convince people it's worth doing, so they won't force me to stop doing it, which would be terrible. If you want to really support me and you buy anything online through Amazon, I usually have an affiliate link in the description. You just go there, click on. I get a small commission for anything you buy from Amazon going through that link. You pay the same price. You don't even have to buy that thing. You can go and click that link, go and buy something else once you've gone through the link, and I still get the commission, which is great. Works well for me. And till next time, keep rolling those 20s.